So reading from Srimad Bhagawatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 9, Text 16. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Yo Va Aham Cha Giri Shash Cha Vibhu Svayam Cha Yovaham Chagrishas Cha Vibhu Svayam Cha Sthiti Upava Pralaya Hitava Atma Mulam Sthitubhava Pralaya Hitava Atma Mulam Vitva Tripad Vabrida Eka Uru Prarohas Vipa Tripa Viridha Eka Uru Prohas Tasmai Namo Bhagavate Bhuvana Drumaya Tasmai Namo Bhagavate Bhavanu Drumaya Yo Vayam Chagrishas Cha Vibhu Svayam Cha Sthitubhava Pralaya Hitava Atma Mulam Vidva Tripa Viridha Eka Uru Parohas Tasmai Namo Bhagavate Bhavana Drumaya Yo Vayam Chagrishas Cha Vibhu Svayam Cha Sthitubhava Pralaya Hitva Atma Mulam Vidva Tripad Varidha Eka Uru Parohas Tasmai Namo Bhagavate Bhavana Drumaya Others?
Yova Aham Chagrishas Cha Vibhu Svayam Cha Sthitubhava Pralaya Hetava Atma Mulam Vitva Tripad Vavrita Eka Uru Prarohas Tasmai Namo Bhagavate Bhuvana Drumaya
Yova Aham Chagrishas Cha Vibhu Svayam Cha Sthitubhava Pralaya Hitava Atma Mulam Vidva Tripada Vrida Eka Uru
Word for word, please repeat. Ya,
Ya,
one who,
one who,
vai,
vai,
certainly,
certainly,
aham,
aham,
I'm sorry, aham cha,
aham cha,
also I,
also I,
grihisha,
Grisha,
grisha cha,
Grisha cha,
also
Shiva,
also Shiva,
also Shiva,
Vibhu,
Vibhu,
the Almighty,
the Almighty,
Svayam,
Swayam,
personality as Vishnu,
personality as Vishnu,
Cha,
Cha,
hand,
and
Stiti,
Stiti,
maintenance,
maintenance,
Ubhava,
Bhava,
creation,
creation,
Pralaya,
Pralaya,
dissolution,
dissolution,
Hetva, the causes,
causes,
Atmamulam,
Atmamulam,
self-rooted,
self-rooted,
Bitva,
Vidva,
having penetrated,
penetrated,
Tripat,
Tripat,
three trunks,
three trunks,
Savarde, grew,
grew,
Eka, one without a second, Uru, many, Paraho, branches, Tazmai, unto him, Namaha,
Namaha,
obeisances,
obeisances,
Bhagavate,
Bhagavate,
unto the personality of Godhead,
unto the personality of Godhead,
Bhuvana Dhrumaya,
Bhuvana Dhrumaya,
unto the tree of the planetary system.
unto the tree of the planetary system.
Translation. Your Lordship is the prime root of the tree of the planetary systems. This tree has grown by first penetrating the material nature and three trunks as me, Shiva, and you, the Almighty, for creation, maintenance, and dissolution. And we three have grown with many branches. Therefore, I offer my obeisance unto you, the tree of the cosmic manifestation. Please repeat. Your Lordship, is the prime root of the tree of the planetary systems. This tree has grown by first penetrating the material nature in three trunks. As me, Shiva and you, the Almighty, for creation, maintenance, and dissolution. And we three have grown with many branches. Therefore offer my obeisances unto you, the tree of cosmic manifestation. Purport. The cosmic manifestation is grossly divided into three worlds: the upper, lower, and middle planetary systems. And then it broadens into the cosmos of 14 planetary systems with the manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the supreme root. Material nature, which appears to be the cause of the cosmic manifestation, is only the agency or energy of the Lord. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 9:10. Madhyakshen prakriti suvite sachacharam. Only under the superintendence of the Supreme Lord does material nature appear to be the cause of all creation, maintenance, and dissolution. The Lord expands into three: Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva, for the maintenance, creation, and destruction, respectively. Of the three principal agents controlling the three modes of material nature, Vishnu is the Almighty. Even though he is within the material nature for the purpose of maintenance, he is not controlled by the laws of material nature. The other two, Brahma and Shiva, although almost as greatly powerful as Vishnu, are within the control of the material energy of the Supreme Lord. The conception of many gods controlling the many departments of the material nature is ill conceived of by the foolish atheist. God is one without a second, and he is the primal cause of all causes. As there are many department heads of governmental affairs, there are many heads of management of the universal affairs. Due to poor fund of knowledge, the impersonalist does not believe in impersonal management of things as they are. But in this verse, it is clearly explained that everything is personal and nothing's impersonal. We have already discussed this point in the introduction, and it is confirmed here in this verse. The tree of the material manifestation described in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita as an Ashvata tree whose root is upward. We have actual experience of such a tree when we see the shadow of a tree on the bank of a reservoir of water. The reflection of the tree on the water appears to hang down from its upward roots. The tree of creation, described here, is the only shadow of reality, which is Parabrahman, Vishnu. An eternal potential manifestation of Vaikuntha Lokas, the actual tree exists, and the tree reflected in the material nature is only the shadow of this actual tree. The impersonalist theory that Brahman is void of all variegatedness is false, because the shadow tree described in the Bhagavad Gita cannot exist without being the reflection of a real tree. The real tree is situated in eternal existence of the spiritual nature, full of transcendental varieties, and Lord Vishnu is the root of that tree also. The root is the same, the Lord, both for the real tree and the false. But the false tree is only a perverted reflection of the real tree. The Lord, being the real tree, is here offered obeisances by Brahma on his own behalf and also on the behalf of Lord Shiva. Om Yantimirandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chaksu and Meditami Tasmasi Gurve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Vistam Shapitam Nidipule Svayam Utkada Mahim Vedanti Svavadantikam Vandeyam Shri Guru Shri Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagajatam Savlagnatam Vitam Sajivam Sabhavetam Sabhutam Krishna Sitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Saha Gulavita Shri Vishakam Vitam Stra Hey Krishna Kruna Sindhu Dinam Bando Jagapate Gopishai Gopikanta Radha Kanta Namaste Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radha Vanan Mishri Vishvan Sundari Harikanani Hari Pre Vanche Kalpachivascha Kripa Sindhi Vicha Vitanam Admigo Vaishnavo Namo Maha Nadhi Snuchena Torva Hisisnina Manina Mandina So, thank everyone for coming to Srimad Bhagavatam class and giving this opportunity to serve. This because it said that only Seva can save us. And there's so more advanced, more learned devotees in this room. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to purify my existence. So we see herein Brahma. So Brahma's duty is to create these material manifestation. Brahma's one day is 1,000 yugas, and every day he wakes up, that this is his daily prayer. So we see in this chapter, Brahma's prayers for the creative energy, that Brahma is praying to Lord Vishnu to inspire him, to empower him, to engage him into creating this universe. And that this is the mood of the devotee. He's simply praying to the Lord that please use me as an instrument. Use me as an instrument to do your bidding. Use me as an instrument to inspire the conditioned souls in the material world. So this is Brahma's duty. And it's so nicely described here that the material world is described as a pure reflection of the spiritual world. the spiritual world is everything is perfect, as it described that every word is a song, every step is a dance. That in the spiritual world, it's a perfect place. And that for the intelligent personality, he aspires to please Krishna, and ultimately he goes to the spiritual world. And then where he can truly serve Krishna there. The problem is, in the material world, we're all trying to be the enjoyer. We're trying to be the enjoyer of everything that we serve in. And so therefore, Krishna is giving us that opportunity. The material world is actually created for that very reason, to come here to try to enjoy it. What we understand is that we try to enjoy in so many particular type of ways, numerous types of ways. We become frustrated again and again. But this is the side of living empty. And this is why we're here in the material world. And there's as described here, there's a particular type of class of, I guess you could say, transcendentalists, that the Mayavadis, that they're saying that this world is false, and that when one goes back to the spiritual world, he just emerges with the bright light or the great energy, and he becomes one with everything. But this is a false notion. Can anybody really say that in this material world, that the material world is false? That when one experiences birth, death, old age, and disease, that these things are false? Empirically, you can see that we experience these things on a day-to-day basis. We can see this on the news on a day-to-day basis. One can just say pinch oneself, and what can one say that that's false? No, one can actually experience that. It's not that this material experience is false, but it's just short-lived. And that anyone is trying to invest in trying to find perfection or trying to find enjoyment in this world, you may find that, wherever it be through any material endeavor, but it's short-lived. And even for that time, even for that small amount of enjoyment, one ultimately has to suffer. That we understand that for the equal amount of sense gratification or pleasure one may find in this world is the equal amount of dissatisfaction or equal amount of suffering. So it's not necessarily that this world is false, it's short-lived and it's impermanent. It's a real idea. But the Mayavadis have this idea, and this is a particular interesting kind of philosophy. It's very, we can see in everyday society that this is in some circles within, say, New Age circles or with alternative ideas, that this is a very popular notion. And to say that in some senses that it makes people sound good. It's kind of like described as, they give a definition of particular people that they may initially sound very spiritual. You could call them soothsayers, in the sense that you may find in, say, yoga circles or New Age type circles that they say kind of rhythmic or poetic types of things, saying it's all one, and we are just all one people. And in one degree, you could say that there's two classes of transcendentalists. There's one that are kind of innocent, and some that aren't. That some particular individuals, they're actually searching for the absolute truth. They just don't have the proper knowledge. They're not introduced to Vedic knowledge. You could see is that one of the earlier Western philosophers like Socrates, or you could say, I guess, Plato. Plato was the disciple of Socrates. That is very similar. They talk about a lot of similar things within Vedic conception. They both talk about varnas within a particular society and how people should be governed, but they don't have the complete knowledge. But I think Prabhupada does describe, and there's that book that I think Harigriva worked with on Prabhupada. He was comparing Western philosophy with Vedic philosophy, and then they did different editions of that. But Prabhupada describes that this is the closest idea to Vedic conception. So sometimes our personalities, they come up just being completely sincere and trying to understand what the absolute truth is. And we can see there are many people out there in society today, they're searching for Krishna, they just don't have the proper knowledge. And it's interesting, sometimes you can meet particular types of people, when you introduce them to Krishna consciousness, and they just take right to it. It's just like, probably in their last life, that they were a devotee. It's just a matter of giving people that Krishna consciousness. And then there's the other class, that the class is that they know actually the Vedas up and down. They're great Vedic scholars. They know Sanskrit word for word. And for some reason, they come up with the wrong understanding. They say, Aham Brahmasmi, that they say that it is all one, that I am God, and that everyone is God. And then if we actually even think about this, in one sense, particularly how a person may say this, they may say it in a particular way that sounds kind of interesting or mystical in a particular type of way. And that's what I was kind of saying earlier about they describe them as soothsayers, is that they have a way of saying things very nicely. It sounds very mystical and very kind of spiritual in a particular type of way. But if one really sits down and really thinks about what one says, then it doesn't really make sense. If one is ultimately God, then why does one have to die, right? Why would you want to die? Why would you want to experience pain? Why would you want to grow old if you're God? Ultimately, if you say you're God, you can do anything, right? If you're God, why do you have to use the bathroom? There's so many ideas, and ultimately they may even come with counter kind of arguments to that. But it really doesn't hold a lot of weight if one really thinks about it in a philosophical basis. I think I've told this story before, but for those that haven't, I'll say it. There was a devotee in the 70s in Gainesville, and he was distributing books on the UF campus. And he met this kind of like New Age personality that was saying it's all one. And they were kind of going back and forth. He said, no, it's one and different. Chincha Veda, Tapa Veda. And they were going back and forth, and philosophically, they weren't really going anywhere. So he just gave them a practical example and said, okay, if it's all one, and you are me and I'm you, how much do you have in your wallet? And he says, well, I have about $100. He said, well, just give it to me, because you'll just get it back. Because I am you and you are me, and whatever you give to me, you'll get back. And so he said, well, I guess you're right. And so he gives him $100. And then after he gave him the $100, he thinks about it for a second, and he thinks, what did I just do? Right? And even now, that $100 is not a lot of money now, but in the 70s it was probably a lot more. So he thinks, oh well, I need to get that money back. I'm a student, I'm a struggling student. So he goes back to the temple. I think Amarindra was running the temple at the time, and he explains to him. He said, I gave this money, and I kind of made a mistake, and can I get it back? And I didn't really need it. And then he thought, well, okay, well, I mean, you kind of did give it to him. I pretty well don't want to force you to give it, but we'll do this. I'll give you $50 back, and I'll give you another $50 worth of books. How does that sound? And so that was kind of the compromise. So that's what ended up happening. So really, when you put one can talk about all kinds of philosophy that may sound nice and mystical and spiritual, but one really thinks about the particular position, that the mind-body position really doesn't hold up. Everyone is different in every particular way. We're all similar in many ways, but we're all very different. We have different personalities, different levels of intelligence, different levels of abilities and skills. And to say that it's all one kind of mixed bag and everything is ultimately one really doesn't make sense when you test it. So this is the understanding that the mind-body theory is just a theory. It doesn't hold up. And it's actually kind of a misunderstanding of the Vedas. Now we understand that, I think before Srila Prabhupada, there were some different Indian philosophers or personalities that came to America. And I think at the time that they were establishing world religions, that the representative of Hinduism was it Yogananda or who was it? It was some, I think it was some particular Indian scholar that was presenting Hinduism. So Vivekananda, yes, which Vivekananda is impersonal to some degree. And so people generally, oftentimes you go to, you'll study Hinduism at the university, and they get a lot of details wrong, but they kind of give a pantheistic view of the Vedas because of that representation. But Srila Prabhupada ultimately came here to defeat that, and he did defeat that in many ways. And he was probably challenged in many ways on this idea, the impersonal type of idea. And what was so amazing about Srila Prabhupada that he found some of these Indian mystics or philosophers that in particular came here. They had named their particular philosophy over their names and they had different followers. But Prabhupada's idea of starting the International Society for Krishna Consciousness was to set it up as an International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Is it a society to come together to glorify Krishna? That Prabhupada never named the society after him, and he never asked for any type of glorification. That if anything, he said that people were praising Prabhupada and said that he did so many wonderful things. And Prabhupada said, if I've done anything wonderful or amazing, he said, I followed the order of my spiritual master. And this is the secret and success is following in the line of the great acharyas. And it's even described that Bhaktisiddhanta was very heavy. He was called the lion guru. He was very heavy because he was very intelligent. I guess there's not even a word to really describe how intelligent he was because he was amazing in some respects, just on a material level, to speak of spiritual level. But even during his time, many people, when they saw him coming, they would cross the street or they would try to get out of his way because they were so fearful of him. And it's even interesting with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya at that time was known as the preeminent scholar and great thinker. He was the master of Vedic knowledge. And when he saw Lord Chaitanya, he recited the Vedas of Lord Chaitanya. And what's interesting, it's very instructive that Lord Chaitanya sat there for a long time just listening to him. So much so that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was kind of like, well, are you really understanding this? Do you have any question anything and what's going on? And he just continued to listen very patiently. And ultimately, he told him that what you said is an error, that you misunderstood the Vedas. And that was like a shocker, that was a killer to his ego, because he thought this one person was an upstart. But he actually came to understand that this was God. And that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was giving him the right instruction. That ultimately the Vedas was to point one to the Supreme Person of Godhead, to understand one term position of Achincha Veda Tattva Veda, meaning simultaneously one but different. So qualitatively speaking, we're one with Krishna, but quantitatively we're vastly different, as described as the ocean. Right? There's the drop of the ocean, and there's the ocean. And we have the same qualities of Krishna because we're coming from Krishna, but qualitatively speaking, we're vastly different. So the ocean is large, and that drop of the ocean is very small. So similar with us, we have the same qualities of Krishna, but quantitatively we're vastly different. And so with those qualities of Krishna, that we have desires, we have material desires. So it's described here as the banyan tree, as you can see on the reflection of the water of the banyan tree, that the roots are seen when you look at that water upside down, and when we see that reflection, is that the roots are almost endless in some degree. So it's a very nice description because you can see that the banyan tree in the backyard that we have here, it's so nice. You can see from the banyan tree, there's so many the branches that are expanding. You can see that they are sinking to the ground at different levels, and if they're not cut back, they ultimately become one big, huge banyan tree. So one has to cut back those particular branches or you have one big banyan tree in the back. And so it's a great description because it's described in the Bhagavad Gita very nicely, as it said here, that the branches of the tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the three modes of material nature. The twigs are the object of the senses. This tree also has roots going down. And these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. The description of the banyan tree is further explained here. Its branches are spread all over in all directions. In the lower parts, there are variegated manifestations of living entities, such as human beings, animals, horses, cows, dogs, etc. They are situated in lower parts of branches, whereas on the upper parts of higher forms of living entities, the demigods, Gandharvas, and many other higher species of life. As a tree is nourished by water, so this tree is nourished by the three modes of material nature. Sometimes we find that a tract of land is barren for want of sufficient water, and sometimes the tract is very green. Similarly, where the modes of material nature proportionally greater in quantity, different species of life are manifest in proportion. The twigs of the tree are considered to be the sense objects. By development of the different modes of nature, we develop different senses. By these senses, we enjoy different varieties of sense objects. The sources of the senses, the ears, nose, eyes, etc., is considered to be upper twigs. Tuned to the enjoyment of different sense objects, the leaves are sound, touch, form, and the sense objects, the roots which subsidiary are the byproducts of different varieties of suffering and enjoyment. Thus, we develop attachment and aversion. The tendencies toward piety and impiety are considered to be the secondary roots, spreading in all directions. The real root is from Brahmaloka, and other roots are in the human planetary systems. After one enjoys the results of virtuous activities in upper planetary systems, he comes down to this earth and renews his karma for fruitive activities for the promotion. This planet of human beings near the field of activities. So it's very nice to describe here that, again, this material world that we're experiencing is not false, but it's temporary. And due to our karmic activities, we're getting our karmic results from that. So we all have different types of karma according to our past activities. That one is enjoying these fruitive activities, and that ultimately one should, by engaging in devotional service, one purifies all this karma that one has. That's the idea. Sometimes people have a misunderstanding of the idea of karma, that they see it as cyclical, right? And it is cyclical, but they think, well, that's all there is. Okay, you engage in good activities and you just keep coming back. And there's different traditions that have, within different Eastern philosophies, have ideas of karma that don't have a conception of God. Like the Buddhists are kind of like that. They talk about karma. They just talk about some, I guess, depending on a particular type of Buddhism. Some say one can reach a kind of particular heaven, and some say not. But the idea is that this cyclical idea of gauging karmic activities. And we understand that even one engages in even activities in the mode of goodness, and one gets good karma, that we understand good karma, bad karma, ultimately it's all bad karma. That even if one gets a high position with great intelligence, great wealth, that ultimately he has experienced birth, death, old age, disease. And they're not very pleasant situations. So ultimately one goes beyond even the mode of goodness, the sattva, transcendental goodness. That one of the dangers in the mode of goodness is that one becomes very proud, right? One may say that, oh, I'm so great because I'm a vegetarian, or I'm so great because I'm so learned and I'm so intelligent. And so this is the trap of the false ego, that he's thinking he's so great. But ultimately, a Krishna conscious person understands that Krishna has given him so much, and he has to be grateful for everything that Krishna's given him. And that he should just use it in Krishna's service. And that once we become proud, that pride comes before the fall. And that pride is actually the false conception in a small sense that we're thinking that I'm all that I serve in. And so we have to constantly struggle and kind of battle against this, because this is actually our real enemy. The real enemy isn't necessarily outside of us, it's more inside of us. It's actually our own false ego thinking we're trying to enjoy, thinking that we're so great. But we're only great according to being in relation to Krishna. And so we have to constantly, as it said, that we have to constantly battle with the mind on a day-to-day basis. But the mind can be controlled through the process of bhakti yoga, by continually engaging in Srimad Bhagawatam, reading Bhagavad Gita, by chanting the holy names with great sincerity, that one can overcome this material obstacle. But we have to be constantly on guard of the mind. As described in the Bhagavad Gita, that the mind is one's best friend or worst enemy. So for the uncontrolled mind, or the unbridled mind, that the mind can give us so many difficulties. That through the intelligence of understanding and reciting Bhagavad Gita on a daily basis, one can actually control the mind and know what to do. That this is basically Bhagavad Gita's instructional guide to go back home, back to Godhead, to purify our existence. So we should take all opportunity that we can to constantly immerse ourselves in not only memorizing or understanding Bhagavad Gita, but to really live it. And by we really live it is where we actually really understand it. Again, there are so many scholars at the university that know the Bhagavad Gita quite well, are very expert in reciting Sanskrit in so many ways, in so many slokas. But they haven't really touched the heart of it, as described that there's the honey in the bottle, right? What they call the bottled liquors, right? They're licking the bottle of honey, but they're not opening it up to taste the nectar of the honey. So similar in the same way that if we don't really internalize this Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam with our day-to-day life or practicing this, we'll never really understand it. And we can have glimpses of it. I have had this experience myself of actually practicing Bhagavad Gita, but there's been times where I haven't, and I can understand it on an intellectual level, but I'm not really experiencing it. So this is where it's really meant to be, is to be experienced on a day-to-day basis, and to put this into practice. And this is actually how we attract ourselves to Krishna, and we attract others to Krishna. That oftentimes, I remember this in Los Angeles, because I would help in the restaurant sometimes, and people would take their prasadam there, and they would always say something like, they would say, well, you know, there's something about this food that I feel so much better when I leave. And they're like, you know, I go to other, vegetarian or vegan restaurants around Los Angeles, which there are a lot, and, it's just not the same. I just feel better once I leave. And so, similarly in the same way, once we've experienced this transcendence, it purifies our existence. And then we have the opportunity to help others purify their existence. So is there any questions or comments?
Just as a comment, today's verse is pretty wild, graphic, just image-wise, just this piercing the material nature with these three mighty trunks. And I always try to wrap my head around just this concept of these three personalities, especially Brahma and Shiva. I mean, it's such a difficult conception for me to understand that they're sort of incarnations of the Lord in terms of their capacity of creation and destruction, Brahma and Shiva, but they're not as powerful. They're incarnations, but not incarnate. It's just it's such a fascinating concept.
It's very interesting too that there's so many like I was saying earlier, that there's so many personalities, that we have so many different aspects about us. And even you see within Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva, that they have their own particular type of personality. And sometimes people think a great personality like Lord Brahma, he's like this wonderful personality, the first created being, and he creates the universe, that even the four Kumaras, right, he ordered them that you must get married and progenate the universe, and they refused. And can you imagine that this great personality of Lord Brahma, and even his children are refusing to have children because they're terrified of taking to married life and having children and all these things. And so they wanted to eternally be, what's it, like 5 years old or 6 years old or something like that, the rest of their lives. And so they refused, even Lord Brahma. And Lord Brahma became so angry that from his eyebrows became Lord Shiva. So you can imagine, he used to get so, you know, we think, well, anger, that's like a material thing, you know, but, you know, in particular circumstances, like her personalities like Lord Brahma, that it was for a particular reason. And from that anger, it produced Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is seen as the destroyer of the universes. And it's interesting about, we talk about Vishnu, Brahma, and Lord Shiva, that they represent particular modes and are in charge of particular categories within those particular modes, but it's not necessarily that they're in those modes. And that's a big difference because, you know, Prabhupada himself, sometimes we get very angry with some of his disciples. He would show great anger. But it wasn't necessarily that Prabhupada was like out of control of his emotions or anything like that. He was actually using anger in a particular way to rectify his disciple, to get them more attentive to what was kind of going on at that time. So that's also kind of the big difference, that even with particular moods, that one can use these moods if one's Krishna conscious in a particular way to show a particular point. So even for Lord Brahma, it seemed like he was very angry, but from that came Lord Shiva, which is a great personality. Even, you know, even we see with Daksha, you know, insulted Lord Shiva so much that who is this person that hangs out in graveyards and puts ashes all over his body and he wears his dreadlocks, and I guess he was kind of considered at that time kind of the modern day kind of hippie type person. But Lord Shiva is a great personality. That is, Lord Shiva is to be honored and to be respected because he's actually, and Lord Shiva is kind of in that kind of unique category too. He's not actually God, he's not actually an ordinary Jivatma either. So he's a great personality that should be respected and honored. And all these things, these pastimes ultimately for us to learn and to consider and implement in our own lives. So thank you for everyone for
I
attending.
had another question. Do you have any idea what an asphata tree is? Have you ever?
Ashvata tree?
Yeah, that's there in this verse.
I'm not sure, Mars? No? I'm not sure.
Like a banyan tree, or I guess it's just a
Banyan?
tree.
This is representative banyan tree. Okay? Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai.
Maybe right there, that's that one.
I was trying to